Well, welcome everyone to our March 2025 Patreon project. And we are continuing our virtual trip around the world. And this time we're in the Northwest states of the US. This is Newport, Oregon. Thanks very much, Joy, member Joy, for the kind sharing of her image. And we discussed this at length, didn't we? Those of you on our Zoom call a couple of days ago, but more on the subject in a little while. So you're very welcome to paint along with me, those of you on here live, and of course, those of you on a critique level with these different levels that we've got on Patreon. Those of you on the critique level get to email me a photo of your painting for an individual video critique by return. Looking forward to certainly seeing those paintings in detail. And even if you're not on the critique level, then please share via the Patreon app. Please share your efforts of the painting for us all to see and comment on and congratulate you on as well. So looking forward to seeing everyone's paintings from this. And I encourage you to, try and put your own stamp on this. Don't necessarily copy what I'm doing. So I will be now going through a step-by-step demo from the very start, looking at the image and just discussing things like composition and my plan of approach. And then I will go through all of the stages of completing the painting with you. And I will stop along the way for any questions that you might have. Right, let's dive into the subject in a little bit more detail. And what I believe we've got here is a pretty iconic coastal harbour scene from the Northwest. The Princess fishing boat there, slap bang in the middle of the photo. And we discussed on our Zoom call the fact that I'd like to try and move that a little bit to the left. Maybe not move anything else, but certainly I may be removing a few things. The clutter on the quayside there, all of these boxes and containers, that forklift truck, which is almost disappearing with the blue boxes behind, this central cabin thingy there, that tall lamp I might move over to the right because I'm moving that fishing boat, moving it just ever so slightly to the left, so it's not right in the middle. And then I might move that lamppost there over to the right. Try and keep the crane in because we've got a little bit of a story going on here. The crane, we can see the wire coming down, and there's a guy in the boat, I guess, just fixing everything before the crate is lifted out of the hold or the craft onto the quayside. Down on the left-hand side, we've got more clutter as well. Containers, boxes, a distant building. Talking about buildings, of course, we've got a bit of a gentle slope here up to the top of the hill. And there's some, again, typical houses of the area. A lot of them are single story with these slender rooftops. And then predominantly over on the left-hand side, we have, again, another sort of icon of the Northwest, these cedar trees. So that will also, including those, and trying to observe, let me try and zoom into one there, trying to observe their form. So it's sort of conical in shape, these lateral branches coming out, a little bit more angular, pointing to the verticals go up, but very much more horizontal, a little bit drooping down the lower leaves, and then the sort of side shoots off those laterals drooping down as well. So we'll try and pay homage to those cedar trees. We have a few figures as well. If we zoom in to the photo, we can see a few figures on the quayside. Well, there's this guy here. Good to include some figures. It's just adds a little bit more interest to the scene. Could be a focal point as well. But we've got some idea of scale as well, don't we, in the scene? What else to mention? The boat itself is a lovely boat. It's got a lot of character. I like all the curves on the boat, the curve of the cabin there, the curve of the stern. Let's go into the stern, the curve of the stern there. The bow is pretty much vertical. We've got some tricky reflections. That's going to be, I think that's going to be the most difficult thing to pull off, these reflections. Composition wise, placement wise, I mentioned the boat going off the left. Everything else, going to try and keep very true to the photo as regards the amount of sky we've got, the top of the hill, the top of the harbour side there where the boat is. So not a lot of water, almost the same amount of water we've got down there as the sky, or actually there's more sky than water. So, but we have got this tricky reflection. There's been a little bit of disturbance, a little bit of gust of wind maybe, and it's ruffled up the surface of the water. So it's not, the edges are difficult to see of the reflection, particularly further away from the boat we go. We've got some, as regards those reflections, we do have some vertical reflections there of the post on that left-hand side of the boat. And then to some extent on the right-hand side, we've got that ladder as well. Lots of houses on the right. I'm going to take the liberty of just spreading those houses around, the rooftops around, just to try and balance out the composition on the hillside. We've got plenty of verticals, apart from the lamppost. We've got the masts of the fishing boat, or rather these booms here, the boom arms that I guess they drop left and right when it's out at sea, going about its job. So, but they're vertical there, but a nice vertical element to kind of, I like verticals, but they sort of connect different elements of the scene together. The boat to the warehouse, to the hill, to the sky. We've got a few more posts there on that road. We discussed the road on the Zoom call the other night. I'm in two minds not to include that. I'm just going to imagine it's not there. It's a similar value to the fields and vegetation around it. And if you squint your eye, you just probably miss it. It's a small part of the scene. I think it's just a distraction. So I'm going to miss the road out, move the buildings around to suit the composition, try and get a balance in there. I mentioned the simplification of the harbour side. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I may come back to that source photo if I need to. You will, on those of you on Crowdcast, you will see the green source photo button there, and also the source photo is shared on my original Patreon post as well, or my previous post on the workshop, and I will share it again when I post all the final instructions tomorrow with those of you submitting your photo to me for a critique. So I'll plonk that photo in there again for you. So hopefully you've managed to get that. Right, let me come back to me then. There we are. Hopefully you should see my workspace now. Let me just tell you about my materials. As always, my paper of choice, Saunders Waterford, cold press, 300 grams, 140 pounds, 15 inches by 11 inches, not stretched. It's just a torn off quarter size imperial sheet, taped down. Paints I've got from Mark Jackman in the UK, neutral tint, normal palette, neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, a lavender there, quinacridone gold, and then a couple of gouache light colors down there, a yellow and a contaminated white. 3 mixing wells. Brushes wise, mainly a mop brush. I'm using a Tintoretto synthetic mop brush, holds a lot of water, good point, good edge to it. Then a small round brush. This is a Skoda. No, I'm actually going to use not this, a little bit smaller one. This one here, small synthetic studio brush from Jackson's. I've got a rigger brush from Lebens in there, and maybe a flat brush. You'll see me use that flat brush for some of the shadows in the trees, in the woods going up the hill. Right, let me just check and see if there's any questions before I start. I don't think there are. Hang on a second. All right. The first step then is to get in the initial drawing, defining all of the main objects that we see. And the key object is the boat, followed by the position of the warehouse behind it up on the quay side. Always for me, the most difficult thing, knowing where to start your pencil marks. But once I've got that right, it all is downhill from there and fairly straightforward. So I'm going to start by trying to get that boat placed right in the scene, sort of in that area there. Not too big, so that it's too sort of dominant. I said on the Zoom call the other day, if you make it too big, it looks like it's some kind of commission painting for the owner of the Princess fishing vessel there. But we also want to include the context of where it is and the landscape and those lovely trees in the background. So not too big, all right? I'm going to get in the stern, first of all, and just lightly get in the main outline of the boat. So it rises, got this nice sort of gentle curve halfway down the boat. So if I have the boat going up to about there, and then the water line, that's important too, to try and get the height of the hull looking about right. There's something like that. Doesn't need to be an ultra straight edge. So we've got the back of the fishing boat, the back half of the top of the hull. It then rises up a little bit, and then a rise to the bow, and that vertical point of the front of the boat. Now, cabin. Again, trying to get the cabin placed. It's not in the middle. It's slightly to the front and not too high as well. The back of the cabin is roughly there. Now the cabin roof rises a little bit. It too's got a little bit of a curve on it. And the front of the cabin there, there's a doorway here. I'll put some more details on that boat in a minute. All right, that's the boat placed in the scene. Now we'll add in all of the supporting acts, supporting objects around that to try and connect everything together. The next thing for me is to get in the top of that harbour wall. Now, it's not a continuous line. On the left-hand side, it does look as if it's a little bit lower, and then there's a sort of structure, a wooden structure, coming out from the side of the estuary here, or the harbour. But anyway, starting from the left-hand side, and it's going to be an almost horizontal line. Now, I don't want it to line up exactly with the rooftop of the cabin, a little bit lower, something like that there. The left-hand side, now on the right-hand side. The water's edge of the side of the harbour, where we've got those rocks coming down on that left-hand side. They join the boat around about there. Look for reference points. The water's edge comes in just about 2/3 of the way down the side of that boat. And then over the other side, difficult to see the water's edge. We've got those two pillars, those two posts coming down on the side of the jetty, and the ladder as well. So we'll get in our one post, and perhaps we'll have the ladder there, then another post, and we'll get another post there. Try and make those posts vertical, Tim. There we go. Going further back, we've got the warehouse, which again is fairly central on the photo, but there's two halves. There's a bigger left half and a smaller right-hand side. Not make it too high, because we want some space for the wooded slopes in the background. Let's move so I've moved the boat back. A little bit of perspective. There's going to be a tiny rise of the rooftop, just a little bit up like that, just a tiny bit. But visually, initially, it looks fairly horizontal. Skyline. There's these conical shapes, and rooftops. So there's a single story, or a single and a double story building behind it up on the ridge. But I can place other buildings where I want to. Let's have about 2 or 3 on this left-hand side. Just make up any sort of geometrical shapes there too. give the impression of those buildings and some rooftops catching the light. I'm going to keep the rooftops lighter than their background, apart from maybe the building right on the ridge there. But these on the wooded slopes, I'll keep those rooftops just a little bit lighter than the background. The warehouse roof is obviously quite light. Crane and figures now. Crane and figures. So this orange crane is around about, again, I don't want to we've got the end of the roof there. I don't want the crane to be over that point, so I want it just a little bit to the right. And let's have it something like that. And it's got its wire down into the boat, and then there's a figure, right? Figure number 1. And again, try and get the figures the right size compared to the boat. Not too large, not too small, you know, just right. Now this figure is perhaps just working on that, on the lifting of this crate coming out of the boat. Then there's going to be a few figures watching from the harbour at the harbour wall. So one there, and let's have a couple over here. Maybe this one's pushing a sack truck or something like that. There are going to be a few of these boxes and containers, not as many, not as complicated as we've got in the source photo. There's pallets on there and different sizes of boxes, but just the kind of impression of a busy harbour front here. And then on the left-hand side of that warehouse, there's a funnel for the boat, mustn't forget that, which is towards the back of the cabin. At least I think it's a funnel. Back to a little bit of detail on the cabin, the doorway and some windows. So a wide one there, just to the right of the door, and then they get a little bit narrower as we go around this curve of the front. On the side of the boat, there's a line that goes just below the top edge. I'll do a dotted line first of all, and then we can make that more solid if we got it in the right position. And there's another line as well just below that, a bit thicker. And there's all sorts of these posts and poles all over the place. We've got the kind of boom arms, if I can call them that, of the fishing boat. They are around about there. I'm not going to draw them in the sky, but they're going to be just behind the boat cabin. That's the left-hand one, and then the right-hand one. Just a little indication where they are. Most of those lines, though, will be obliterated when I when I go in with the greenery of the forest behind the warehouse. Reflections wise, there's the reflections of the front and back of the boat, the posts on the harbour side. Maybe there's another post there. So I think it's taking shape now. Just double check my drawing before I get to start painting. Particularly the perspective. There's not much perspective to worry about, but just the actual angle of that roof, which I said is pretty much horizontal. And then we've got the top of the harbour and the boat itself and the water line of the boat coming down a little bit like that. I think for me, that's my drawing done. Don't think there's any questions. Let me start painting then. First step is to paint in. I'm going to pretty much cover the whole scene, paint in the sky. So I'm going to work top to bottom, sky. Then as I paint in this area here, I'm going to paint in the colour. I'm going to use the colour of the light rooftops. Then the rooftop of the warehouse and the boat is a very, very light blue. I'm not going to leave the paper white. You might want to, if you want to get a little bit more impact of the contrast of values, but I want to take I don't want to have the white of the paper. I just want to go a little bit cooler. The rooftop of the warehouse is a little bit darker on that side to that side, but don't worry too much about that. Just essentially keep that light. So we're covering over all of this area and the boat with that kind of lighter blue color. Very pale light blue. The boat itself, lighter here and a little bit darker towards the back. Now, as I come into the water, I'm going to be thinking about, with watercolor, working light to dark. I'm going to put in a base layer of the lightest color that I see in the water. And that is, in places, the little bit of reflection of that boat. So I've got to go a bit darker than the color of the boat for that reflection, all right? If you look at the source photo, you will see that more clearly towards the front. It's quite light at the front, but a little bit darker, tiny, tiny bit darker for the reflections. Mop brush then, sky first. I've got my water pot over to the right. And let's just put in some clear water, top of that sky. The color of the sky, we do have these small, light, high altitude clouds there. But essentially the color of the sky, let's choose a cerulean blue and a little bit of cobalt. I think I've got a bit of alizarin crimson on my cobalt there. Let's choose mainly this cerulean. Perhaps a bit of cobalt green. There's a little bit of green in there. And my normal technique for doing the sky, you could, of course, have nice long lines for your wash, but I'm just dabbing the sky. Come down below the trees because we can see the sky on these trees here. We can see a little bit of the sky through the foliage. As I come down, then just need to think about the color of the rooftops, which is a little bit of a sort of warm gray. So burnt sienna, a bit of burnt umber, a brown, tiny bit of blue. Yeah, that's okay. Burnt sienna, a little bit of cobalt blue. Over the whole scene. Now continue with the blue, and a very light blue. It's going to dry lighter. Over the whole scene. Down to our boat, which I will use a little bit of very weak cobalt, perhaps a little bit of lavender in that. Let's say a little bit darker towards the back of the boat, and use a tissue just to lift off some of this if it's a bit too dark. Now continue down into the water, go over that area there. A little bit of brown because there's some cartons and so on over there. Now down to the water and trying to get a darker value than the boat. We've got a little bit of the sky coming down, sky reflected in this bottom right corner. So going with the blue there. And then just continue over. Covering the whole scene. It might look a total mess at the moment, but keep with it. We're just covering up the paper, so we're not just a little bit easier to then make sure we don't leave any bits of the paper showing through. Don't touch the sky. It was granulating quite nicely there. Don't touch the sky. I'm going to use my hairdryer now just to speed up the process, because I want this now to be totally dry before I go on to the next step. Obviously, now adding in darker values, the trees, the side of the warehouse there, the harbour wall there, and then we're coming down into the reflection. So again we're working top to bottom, but gradually going darker. Right, hairdryer, everyone. My microphone should automatically mute itself. I found on previous events, but just in case it doesn't, I'll count down 3, 2, 1. All right, I think that's nice and dry now. Still sticking with the mop brush for me, and those trees, first of all, coming down from the ridge at the top, the skyline coming down. But those trees at the very top, they're silhouetted against the sky and we can see their form. Now I need to get those right. Trying to make them cedar-like, okay? Right, so I will mix up now some green for those trees. And a good green is a little bit of, it's a cool green. So my viridian green, little bit of burnt umber, little bit of ultramarine blue as well. Don't want to make them too green because that's going to bring them too far forward. But of course they are silhouetted against the sky, so they do appear quite dark. There we are. Now, we could start on the left-hand side here just to do a little bit of a practice of these trees. Yeah, I think that's close to what I want them to look like. So keep this mix going. And a little bit of a point to my brush, and then just continue with the rest of these trees. Definitely need a point to define those branches. So central trunk, start fairly horizontal and then smaller, but angle those laterals a bit more angular, a bit more vertical as you come down. Actually come lower with these trees, but leave just a little bit of the sky showing through in a few places, but then get more solid as we come into the hill proper. As we come down towards the warehouse, as we come closer to us, this green gets a little bit more vibrant. So I'm going to pick up my spring green here. You could pick up a yellow if you wanted to. And again, notice my kind of technique here. Coming down to the containers and boxes down near the harbour wall and the left-hand side of the warehouse. Now, an important line here across the top of the warehouse. A little bit more paint on my brush. But a good line here. Try and keep my hand fairly steady. Continue over. Back to my cooler That's my cooler green. There's that distinctive tree here in the middle, the one that I pointed out when we started. And now try and do a good job with this one. Got the central, get more of a point, got the central trunk, and then go to the top, try and get that conical shape. While this is still damp, I'm going back into it with thicker paint just to get a bit of a texture of those woods there. Gradually getting over to the right hand side. Make sure I've got my point still on my brush. And so I've got my silhouetted, I'll put that building in later on. That's my building at the very top. then the trees on the right hand side. Now I'm going to negatively paint around some more rooftops like I'm doing here to define those buildings. So keep the roof unpainted. There's a few more shapes there. Down, so that's where the road was, which I'm not bothering with. But I will change now from the green. I'll change to, let's come down to this right hand side of the warehouse. Mix in a warmer color, a brown. Make sure my brush is clean. A brown, maybe with a little bit of blue, but just sort of give a hint of something going on here. Something different. There's a bit of orange. But come down and again, negatively paint around, carefully does it, around the building there. We've got the figures there, a couple of figures, and then those boxes on that right-hand side. Next will be the side wall of the side wall of that warehouse. I'm going to use a lavender here. It's like a bluey gray color. So something bluish. I'm going to choose lavender for this one. See how this turns out. That's too strong. A little bit of, probably a little bit of burnt sienna. Like the top of the roof, gently paint along the bottom there. And we've got the end of the left-hand side, and then it continues over to the right. This is where there's lots of blue boxes. You may want to put those in if you want to. Go quite light on this right-hand side here. Continue down. And again, as I come down to the harbour, the top of the harbour, not make it a flat edge, just introduce a sort of, giving the impression of some objects there, some smaller objects on the harbour side there. There's my figure, which may be a light figure for me. Paint around the funnel of the boat. And front of that cabin, perhaps a few more boxes here on the right hand side. Over on the left, there are a few little sort of containers and boxes that are a similar color to the side of that warehouse. All right, that's half of it done anyway. Right, now the harbour wall. We're going to negatively paint around now very carefully around the boat. And we're coming down to the water's edge, and then we can start doing the reflections. Let me just see if there's any questions. No, I don't think there are. I'm just keeping my eye on the woods, because when that is a little bit drier, I'm going to go in with some darker values to define the shadow between the trees, just to define them a little bit more. But I don't want to do it while it's actually quite wet. So let me just continue down with the harbour wall. On the left hand side, it's kind of rocky here, so I've used that lavender and add in a bit of burnt sienna. Now, coming over to the boat, we're going a bit darker. I'm using a burnt umber and a neutral tint to go quite dark here. It's very dark right underneath the top of the jetty. Got to be careful here. We're coming down to the top of the boat. Try and get a straight edge at the top. Paint carefully around my fisherman in the boat. And over on the right hand side, check my brush. Top of the front of the boat. Trying to make sure this all sort of lines up here. Then the straight vertical of the bow of the boat. I'm just negatively painting around these posts. So we've got one there, and then one here. Got a ladder there. and down to the water's edge. We go a little bit darker down towards the water. Then that right-hand post here, try and keep it parallel to the side. I've left a little bit of a bead here at the bottom because when I come down to do the water, I want it to gel together quite nicely. Now, back to these trees and flat brush. I think that's all right now. Flat brush and a darker green. So my Viridian green, neutral tint. And then just pick up on a few, look at the photo for some inspiration, but just adding in a few darks here and there. Not too many. And you can, as you have applied that initial layer of green, you can sometimes see, as the paint is drying, you can sometimes see some trees forming, some shapes forming, and you can try and emphasize those. For example, there's a lighter, I don't know whether you can see that, but there's a lighter value there. So I could go in behind that or around it and just define that tree shape in a little bit more detail. Do you see? Maybe I've gone a bit too dark there, but just defining that lighter value as a tree shape. So starting from the edge of that tree and then just flicking out, getting a soft edge. If I don't have a soft edge, I can just use my fingertips a little bit to help things along. Down here, there's a darker area there. It's important to get some soft edges to these shapes, a hard edge and a soft edge. And there's a big darker area just in here. Need to get in a few more smaller, darker shapes in the treetops here. And some of these trees, they're a little bit darker on the left-hand side. The light's coming from the right. So some of these trees are a little bit darker on the left. Few more of what I'm doing here over on the right-hand side. Neutral tint, ultramarine blue. There's a bit of a dark where that road was, just under there. So don't overdo it. A little bit of a dry brush mark here. There's not much paint on this flat brush now. You get the idea. There. I might come back to that, but I think that's enough for now. Some of these houses need to be defined a bit more with some darker paint, the walls. I'll start off with the silhouette of the building at the top. Right, so ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and they don't have any chimneys, so it's just the trying to get the shape of the roof right. There's one, and then get this one in here. So I've gone quite thick with this paint. This one here is like a darker version of the warehouse. There, and a few of the others. Give them different colors. I really went quite random with my shapes on this right hand side just to give the impression of some buildings there. And also some of these buildings, they've got a bit of a shadow to the left. That's going to help a little bit to just emphasize the direction of that sunlight coming in. There's a shadow underneath the building here. Yeah, let's get that one in. back to my mop brush. So I'll just do a few shadows here, some of the boxes, and then we'll come down into the water. Back to my mop brush, or certainly a bigger brush than that's too small. Right. So it's basically a darker color. Whatever you use there, go darker. Bit of neutral tint. No, a bit more neutral tint for me. Lavender, neutral tint. Not dark enough. That's the shadow. We've got a few little areas of paper showing through here. That could be little objects on the side of that warehouse. Little lights or lamps there, and a bit of shadow coming from them. Right, I think I've got the value right on that. While I'm at it, I can just create a few more darker values here and there. So it would be dark on the left-hand side of the warehouse because the light coming from the right. A few more over here. Right, down to the water then, the tricky bit, those reflections. I'll start, so essentially I'm going to start from the water's edge, work my way down, but I need to be careful, of course, around the boat here. That's creating most of those lighter reflections. I'll start over here on the left-hand side. So again, thinking about the value, darker than because these are fairly light, we want to go darker than the actual object that it's reflecting. So a burnt sienna. Let's see how dark that is. Might be a little bit too dark, actually. And up to the bottom of that boat. Some of the reflection now turns to a green. I'm using the edge of my brush. I've got a good edge to the brush and almost at a 45-degree angle, creating lots of mainly horizontal shapes, little thin horizontal shapes, leaving a little bit of the paper showing through. And then these shapes can get wider as we come down towards us. Go over the edge of the paper. A bit denser there. Now this boat, the reflection of that boat, I need to go a bit darker here. Do you see if actually my boat is darker than the reflection? So I need to go darker here and a little bit of cobalt and cerulean. Not too dark. The front of that cabin is quite light, quite bright, so it's going to create a little bit of a lighter reflection here. Same technique, lightly touching the surface of the paper. For me, the mop brush is ideal. Now I need to go a little bit here. We're going to be reflecting some of the wood, so I'll go to the darker green. I've actually got a little bit more of the water showing than the photos. I'm having to try and imagine what the reflection will look like with if that photo we were a little bit further back. There we are. So more solid here, and then as we come down, we can see more gaps appearing, and the waves, the reflection marks are fatter, wider. Let's continue over here. Then a little bit of green here. Now up to the right hand side of the boat, and now we're reflecting the darker harbour wall here. and it's a similar value to the wall. Start off with a darker value. Unfortunately, I've just lost my bead. I was spending too long up there. Doesn't matter. Right at the bottom of the boat on the water's edge, there's going to be almost, the reflection is going to be almost a straight edge. And then we are starting to have a little bit more disturbance in the water. A little bit like that. Sorry, this is a little bit laborious here because I've got all this area to complete with this kind of technique. Nearly there. Down to the edge of this reflection, just have a few, few little waves reflected there. Need to go a little bit darker with the reflection of those poles. You can see it's the same value, but I'll do that in a minute. Let's just complete this bottom right hand corner here. A little bit darker there because that's the reflection there of a little bit of the harbour wall. So just a little bit there. That'll do. I need to now get in some darker shadows on the boat. So there's a shadow just below the roof of the cabin, and then a shadow going up from the back going up to the front, and it's sort of there's an angle to it there. The color of that shadow is going to be let's have a cobalt with a little bit of alizarin crimson. Cobalt, little bit of alizarin crimson. Now, starting with the cabin first of all. And again, check the edge on my brush. Get a good edge. Up to the doorway. And then the back of the boat. And up to the front, and then the water's edge. Like that. I think we're down to what I would refer to as the detail stage now. Those trees there, they just need a bit of adjusting for me. A few more shadows in there. Right, details. So houses first. Let's just get in some darker lines to define the rooftops. A few windows as well. The side walls of the warehouse, they've got some lines going down there. Very thin lines. Could use a rigger for this. Continue over. There we go. The roof of the fishing boat, the cabin, and the doorway the doorway is just here. And then the windows, 1, 2, 3. Then the bit of definition to the lines going up the boat. Just make sure I don't smudge my work. Up like that. And then there's another line lower down. Then darker one here. So it starts off quite thick and then goes a little bit thinner. Bit of burnt umber, bit of neutral tint for this. Not too much paint on the brush. And there's a reflection to that darker shape as well. Now, bit of a curve going upwards and a bit of a water's edge. To me, it looks like there's a little bit of red in it. Better put in the princess sign. So we'll start about here. P R I. Better spell this right. Princess. CESS. CESS. And there's some numbers there. Funnel. Right, let's get in the figures. Let's give this guy in the boat an orange jacket, life jacket or overalls or something like that. The other figures here, here, some flesh color and then some color for their clothing. Something dark, I reckon, is going to show up. Well, we've got this figure here. He's quite light. Let's keep him light and dark trousers. These over here. The poles here, I'm going to make them a little bit warmer. So cadmium orange, and then a little bit darker for the reflections. The orange crane. So cadmium orange, fairly thick, actually a little bit of yellow as well. Let's make it a little bit more of a yellowy orange. Something quite thick. Now that crane, we've got the central bit to it. Like that, and then there's the arm coming out. So there's a bit there, a bit there, and some supports. When I've got this orange, I can dot this around in various places. Of course, we've got a bit of the reflection of that crane as well, and that figure. The rocks on the left-hand side, let's just define those a little bit more. Darker post there. Let's have another one here. And a bit of definition to the harbour wall. Okay. Next, I think, let me just make sure these figures are all right. I think we're getting some of the lighter, those masts and the boom handles. Need to get in maybe a little bit of a canopy at the end of this boat. There's a window on the warehouse. There, let's put a window in. The shadow on the crane. And just a suggestion of something going on to the right hand side of that warehouse. Just some marks. Right, let's get into some lighter values and then we're almost done. Rigger brush then, I've got a Lebenson rigger brush, ideal brush for me for doing this. And I need something thick now. I use white gouache. If you haven't got white gouache, you can use some fairly thick white paint with not pure white maybe, but just sort of grayed down a little bit. The lines that we can see, that these lighter masks, they're not pure white. My white down here has been contaminated a little bit from a previous painting, so it should be okay. It's not pure white. Now it has dried on my palette a little bit, so I need to just dampen it a bit to get it a bit more workable. And there's the kind of the optimum thickness for painting these lines as regards the ratio of paint to water. Too thick, then you get like a dry brush mark. Too thin, well, it dries darker and it goes a little bit milky. I'm nearly there. As you can see, I'm working it. I've got like almost like a thin watery paste, if I could describe it like that. Like my trees, we can test on the side of a picture, try and get a good point to it. Yeah, I think that's okay. Let's do some of these thinner lines in the distance. So there's maybe a suggestion of something going up there on the road. Maybe just a few little lights for some windows. Right, there's the line coming down from the crane, which I think is that's the edge there. Most difficult bit, a little bit more water. Most difficult bit is going to be these boom arms here. Now, in the photo, they reach the sky. They're sort of like that. So I'm going to have to, I could turn this painting upside down and do the line like that, but as I'm this way around, I'm going to have to try and judge it right. So we're around about there. And if you can't do a continuous line, do a broken line. We're going a little bit thicker as we come down to the boat. That's one. The one behind it is a little bit lower, parallel to it. I haven't put in the lamp, doesn't matter. Right, the angular supports to this, they start, oh, there's a few lines here. There's the angular supports from here and they go down to just the side of the cabin and likewise parallel. Like that. There's also another one that comes. I'm not sure if it's the same boat or some other boat behind it, but there's another line there, line there, line there, line there. Now we've got some thinner lines now. There could be wires, supports, and so on. These, so thin line, good brush. And this is where we don't often need a continuous line. Sometimes a broken line would be a bit more convincing. Bit of a highlight on these figures. I think we're nearly there. Oh, ladder. Let's do the ladder down here. Down to the water's edge. And then the verticals. Maybe there's a bit of reflection of that. Have I missed anything out? Well, I've got this white paint the right consistency. I could add in some lighter reflections, just a little bit. I don't want to overdo the reflections. I'll go back to my small synthetic round brush, but I need to make sure it's very clean for the white paint. Yeah, I think it's okay. Just a little test here and there, so a bit more for the front of the cabin there. Reflection of those tall masts. Just need to add a little bit of darkness behind these masts. Just a tiny bit. Particularly where, like here, we're going across a light roof, so just a little bit there. Only do this on the thicker objects. Maybe a little bit in the sky as well. Yeah, there we are. Can I add anything more? Picking up some brighter green here, fairly opaque, just to define some of these cedars a bit more. Where else can I see one? Don't overdo it. Know when to stop, as they say. I think I am about done. Let's just double check this boat here. Oh, there's a dark object there. Not sure what it is, but get it in. And that can just give us a bit more reflection down there. Right, I think that's it for me. So thanks very much for watching. As I normally do now, if any of you have been painting along with me or you've done a sketch, if you'd like to share with the crowd color system